talk about the flawed peace. So in chapter 29, section 4, titled Flawed Peace, after winning the war, the Allied powers wound up in a bitter argument that left many of these nations feeling betrayed. And so the Big Four were the most powerful countries after the First World War. The United States, France, Great Britain, and Italy were all called the Big Four. And these leaders came together to discuss, okay, we just fought this big war. Okay, somewhere around 22 million people died. If we don't make some changes, it's going to keep going on forever and ever and ever. You know, I mean, that's kind of like if you kept up with Game of Thrones and you watched the finale. So there were these horrible things done in the name of warfare. And then at the end, the people came together and said, we've got to do something different. Because what's happening is getting millions of people killed. So, yay, they fix it all, right? Well, okay, it's a TV show. But in reality, what happened? After the big giant war where millions of people died. Well, guess what? People were angry. Woodrow Wilson, meanwhile, President of the United States in 1918, outlined his hope. Okay, what do I want this war to be about? How can we prevent future wars? And his plan was called the 14 Points Peace Plan. He believed in a just and a lasting peace that would be achieved by implementing these points. Number one, an end to secret treaties. No more of this Serbia calling up Russia, Russia calling up everybody, and a regional conflict turns into a global one. No more of that business. No more of this German subs sinking cruise ships or British blockades of entire countries. If you are at sea, you should have the right to go anywhere. International waters have to be respected. Free trade. In fact, he called for an abolition of tariffs. Let's not tax other countries for doing business with us. Let's allow free trade to connect our world. And by the way, we don't need millions of soldiers and standing armies. Garrett, that's not cool. The nation of Israel, for example, maintains universal male military service, which means in 4 years, welcome to the military. All of you, young men, if you're in Israel. Now, that concept is kind of concerning, because that means that Israel is a very militarized state. Wilson was saying, do we need that? Do we need to teach all our young men how to kill? I don't know if that's what I want. That's what Wilson believed anyway. So reduced national armies and navies. And then his biggest one, and he actually expanded on this over several of the 14 points, was let's let the colonies have their freedom. If Serbia doesn't want to be a part of the Austria-Hungarian Empire, let him go. You know, this is where he busts out his Disney Frozen and sings Let It Go, right? This is, he's saying, look, if they don't want to be a part of your empire, don't make them. And he said, look, if you guys will listen to those points, if you will consider them, that will eliminate many of the reasons for us to go to war in the first place. And it was all based around this idea, this democratic idea of the self-determination of the rights of man. That if Serbia doesn't want to be a part of this giant empire, okay, bye Serbia. And the idea was that if we allow people to live their lives in peace, they'll have no reason to go to war. And if we promote global trade, that will actually enhance the global economy and people won't be fighting wars over resources. And then finally, his last of the 14 points. What if we had this international organization designed to maintain world peace. What if we had this really cool system that, man, if two of you guys have a problem with each other and you can't work it out yourselves, you could sit down with another group and mediate this. You could air your complaints and decisions could be reached. Oh my gosh, what if there was a League of Nations where countries could talk about their problems in a formal setting instead of just bickering and killing each other? You know what? They gave the man the Nobel Peace Prize for this. They said, "Congratulations, Mr. Wilson. We believe your idea will promote world peace." And then you know what? They didn't listen to him. They gave him the biggest, the fanciest award that they could, and they didn't listen to him. Why? Because, guess what? If you just fought a war where tens of millions of your people died, and then suddenly the war is over, are you just going to be happy about it? Like, oh, cool, you just killed all the young men in my entire country. Let's be friends. I don't think it's not realistic. I hate that, but you have to factor in anger, hatred, resentment, and revenge. Because that's what the leader of Britain won his election on. His campaign slogan to the British people who voted for him was, and I quote, "Make Germany pay. I will get revenge." And they voted for him based on that. The same with France. And so nobody listened to Wilson's idea. They were all like, "Shut up, United States. You came into the fight late. You actually profited off of the war because we were selling weapons and goods and whatnot to the Allied powers." They were like, "You stay out of this. I lost all my kids in this war. Someone in every house in my neighborhood lost someone. You don't understand." And so the Allies signed a separate truce called the Treaty of Versailles. Now, they did agree to the League of Nations, but the Treaty of Versailles was harsh. Number one, Germany had to sign a document stating this was all our fault. Number two, they had to agree to pay $33 billion in reparations or damages, like a lawsuit, to the nations. Germany would lose much of their territory and have severe restrictions placed on what they could do moving forward. And all German colonies would be overseen by the League of Nations until the League itself deemed they were ready for independence. In fact, the Treaty of Versailles created whole new nations. The Austro-Hungarian Empire would be broken up into a bunch of tiny little countries. The Ottoman Empire would be broken up, a bunch of tiny little countries. Russia lost more territory than anyone, and all of Eastern Europe was broken up into a bunch of tiny little countries. And so here's Europe before the war. Notice, very distinct: Germany, France, Britain, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire. Now, look at Europe after the war. So, before the war, you have these big countries with defined borders, and several you see in the before-war map that you don't see in the after-war map. Some countries, like the Ottoman Empire, were eliminated entirely. Russia, if you notice, before the war, held most of Eastern Europe. After the war, all of those little countries were formed. So there's some problems here. The peace was built on bitterness. And the German people felt the brunt of this blame. They felt bitter and betrayed. America, to our credit, never signed the Treaty of Versailles. We said, look, we're not going to be a part of your hate, people. We signed a separate truce with Germany. Many Americans actually opposed our involvement with the League of Nations, and so the United States government never agreed to Wilson's plan to form a League of Nations. The concern was that if we join some type of international organization, it's going to lead to a world government. You know, all that Illuminati conspiracy theory stuff, people were very concerned about that in 1918 and wanted nothing to do with any type of international organization. So the League of Nations never had the support of the United States. And so it really was hamstrung from the beginning. Many former colonies were angry because they had hoped to gain their independence, but they're not going to. The war guilt clause forced Germany to accept blame for a war that wasn't entirely their fault. And these nations really just wanted conquest. And so this war that we thought would make the world safe for democracy really just led to further hatred.